And thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. It's going to be about, these topical matters plus a bit more. Now, I decided to do this because I was looking at my video reviews, and in my video reviews, I wasn't talking about COVID-19 coronavirus. Not that I should necessarily, but it just seems so awkward. It's a very bizarre time. It's an ongoing crisis that is actually pretty exhausting for everyone, right? Not to say for myself in particular, but in terms of just as a fatigue that we all have. And yes, there's some amazing people who are everyone from the service industry that is still working. In addition to that, the healthcare industry workers who are true heroes around the world. So amazing work that's being done today. And looking at my video reviews, I thought it's really inappropriate that I don't talk about this. It really has to come through in some way because it is an extraordinary time. I get daily emails from winebusiness.com, and in their particular posting, they had one from Spitbucket, which is a website for, I guess, wine, beer, and spirits. I've never really heard of them before, and I'm not sure why Wine Business would list them in such an important fashion. Probably because I think part of this article was in Meiningers, which is a German publication in the wine trade, and it's highly regarded. And so that's probably how it made it there. I thought topical matter, even from the title, was inappropriate. It was, how can we make virtual wine tasting less sucky? Okay, that's just so weird. And really when it came down to it, it was just like how, what was the mindset of the person writing it? And, I stopped about 30% of the way through. I thought, I can't read this anymore. So one of the highlights I wrote was, most of these events are boring as hell. And I thought to myself, wow, that's very interesting, because I've been to many a virtual wine tasting event, and ultimately they are not just about me. And I'm glad. That would be so embarrassing, right? If it was just designed for me. Or maybe it's specific to an industry. It's specific to maybe wine trade or media trade. And that's really important, right? To gather people together. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about trends, or let's talk about news. So I wrote a response. I'll post it right here. It's called In Support and Defense of Virtual Wine Tasting. And ultimately has to do with, they're very important. So in this particular time point, it is so bizarre. We are, trying to survive. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen next, what's going to happen to our jobs, what are we going to do as a country, as a world, and it's going to be having rippling effects. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting, because when I speak of virtual wine tasting and I talk down about it, or it doesn't please me, it's not, again, designed for me specifically. So when these producers, small or even large producers, are having virtual wine tasting, it's really to go out there to talk about wines, the wines they're producing, to talk about, keeping this top of mind for a consumer. Yes, we are still in business. Yes, we are producing wine. Here's what we do. Here's, where we expect 2019 to look like in terms of the latest vintage, or here's what 2020 will probably look like, or, we've had some budding going on already. There's things to talk about that are important, that are interesting to someone. Now, if you're not interested in a virtual wine tasting, you don't need to attend them. If I wasn't, I wouldn't be attending them, but I do. And I may not be specifically invited. I'm just going to look at what's happening on Facebook, or look what's happening on Twitter. Just give an interest. I have an interest. I really think about this in terms of, I know people who own restaurants, who own bars, who own wineries and distilleries and breweries. And ultimately, I want to see how I can help them. I've been posting things like on Twitter, help the small business. They're still open, or they have carry. There is something to help someone with. So it is really not within my brand, or even as a person, to go out there and speak negatively about people doing virtual wine tasting. Good for them. They should be doing that. I do have some particular pointers. I'll post those down here. In addition to that, I'll talk about that briefly. It's really important to think about this in terms of, when I see a wine producer who's promoting a virtual wine tasting, good for them. It's not just about that particular producer. Even if it's a small producer, even they're just producing, 100 to 200 cases, it's a community that is relying on that particular person. It could be the suppliers, the vendors. It could be particular people who are working for that person. It's not just one person that's involved. It's many people. I really wanted to, counter that, and I did so. And I gave the reasons why I think it was not particularly appealing. And so even the title, when I think about how to make virtual wine events less sucky, there's that implication that they still suck. Okay, pull away from that. First of all, the word suck and sucky as it relates to wine tasting, or in this trade, or just even talking about it in such a manner, is so demeaning and really not necessary. And it's also thinking about, okay, well, here are some ideas that this person has, and to make them less sucky, but guess what? They'll still suck. Well, do you even have an interest in talking about this? If it's not an interest to this person, why even write about it? Probably because it was picked up in Meiningers. And ultimately, I saw another article in Meiningers, and I do get some of their news. And one of the articles was about, the wine shows that have been canceled this year, like Vin Italy and also Provine. And it was really this very disappointing way of thinking about, oh, well, maybe they need to go away, or maybe it's lived past its time. And, I think in some ways I've read these articles in Meiningers, and I don't really think they're really helpful. I don't think they're what the trade needs or wants, or is really something that's going to help elevate the industry. If you want this industry to survive, Meiningers, you really want to make sure that the industry does survive, and you want to find pathways for surviving. I think that's really important. So I think that's one thing I want to think about. I want to, encourage you, if you're interested in looking at a virtual wine tasting, look at them, find them, they're out there. I did list one particular producer down below in that article, and you can look them up in terms of their consistent Tuesday tastings. I definitely pull away, I glean something from every single tasting I go to, and it's also my responsibility as an attendee. Let me ask questions. Again, it's not about me, but maybe there's things that I can bring out and talk about and also promote. I do have a share of responsibility for making something a success in addition to that. That's just where I come from. And so again, I think, in promotion, I think it's important. Small producers are doing whatever they can to survive. Bars, restaurants, micro distilleries, microbreweries, it's really important to do so. So everybody's looking for, what is it going to do to help them to survive during this Great Depression, recession, whatever it's going to be called. And it really does impact people. People are taking this seriously because it is a serious situation. So what's going to be taking a hit in this particular period of time are the restaurants. I have read article after article where restaurants have been selling their particular amazing wine list because, they're in dire straits. And that's really, really unfortunate and very sad. This is a restaurant town, San Francisco, or it was. I'm not sure what it'll look like post-crisis. And ultimately, I really want restaurants and all these small businesses to survive because people work there. It's something that people take pride in doing. And so it is my desire to lend that hand. On Twitter, I write about it. I put hashtags to support small business, even if I do not know them, because I think it's important to do if I think somebody needs some sort of shout out, call out, something. So in the years between 2009, 2019, you have a 63% increase in number of wineries. So today we have approximately 10,000, and that number is up from say 6,400 from 2009. That's a huge increase, very large number. And ultimately, and I'm very, very concerned about it, is that many of these may just go away. When you think about these producers, their rents don't go away, their equipment rentals or their payments of their equipment do not go away, their obligations do not go away, their liabilities just do not go away. That's what business is, and that's something that is really important. Why that's important is because it's spread through all 50, yet we know that say 84% of all wines that are produced are in California, 5% in Washington, and the rest are throughout the other 48 states. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not important in the other states. It's because I think in terms of how we, parse this out, there are people who make a living. It could be in Tennessee or Kentucky or Boston or New York or wherever, but people are making a living. And it's really a great way for them to make a living. And it's something that they, perhaps it was a dream, perhaps it was a desire to own their own business, a desire to own a winery, a distillery, a microbrewery, whatever it might be. So the microbrewery industry or the craft brewery industry is pretty large as well, about 7,450 producers. Now, again, that growth rate has been phenomenal in the past 10 years and 20 years. And it's a big industry, about $114 billion in US total retail sales. And ultimately, that's a break between, say, 13.2% of that total number are devoted as microbreweries or designated as such, and 25% are craft breweries, which means slightly larger than a microbrewery. These are small entrepreneurs who decided to go on their own. They have a passion for beer, they have a passion for their community, they're bringing economic vitality to their community, and if that just goes away tomorrow, that is very, very sad for not just them, but the community as well. It's something that it was a promise, it was a pathway of people creating a job to help them, their families, and other people's families as well, and their community. And it's a pride in making things, and that was done in all 50 states. It probably will still be done in all 50 states. And again, who knows what that will look like. And so ultimately, if you find a way to support that, that's very important to think about. distribution for all these particular distilleries, breweries, and also wineries, is it all on premise or is it off premise or is it a bit of both? If it's a bit of both, well, there's impact for those businesses, right? So maybe 40% of that a particular brewer is out of that 40% of dollars. Also, there's a lot of misinformation going on. We don't really know what the particular snapshot of what the wine, beer, and spirits industry will look like. Even today, we hear notes of, we have record sales right now online. Will that happen in the next 3 months, 4 months, a year? Maybe it won't. Maybe people will switch to a different beverage altogether. So think about supporting your favorite restaurant, your favorite winery, your favorite cafe, favorite coffee producer. There's so many different ways of thinking about this. There's so many, the blossoming in the past 10 years it wasn't just a coastal thing that was going on. It was throughout all 50 states where people were creating work for themselves, creating a vision for amazing coffee, beer, spirits, tea, whatever it might be, restaurant, food, service, etc. So think about that and try to think how you can lend a hand. Now I'm going to go back to, if you want to create a virtual wine tasting as a producer, and I'm going to give you some pointers here or some thoughts that I think can make it successful and to manage your expectation. Now, in our world today, we are constantly thinking about things in terms of big data, a logarithm, and how this is going to drive a business. I think there's some notion in the casual observer in our world today that big data rules everything, and it kind of does, and it most likely does not. Here's how it probably does not: is we live in a dynamical world where people, individuals, competition make everything dynamical. That is, that there's constant change, and just because you write an algorithm for a particular behavior or characteristic or person, it doesn't mean that people don't change. It doesn't mean that business conditions don't change. So marketing is not just check the box. It's more than that. It's an ongoing event. It's an ongoing business function. And as such, it's something that you constantly have to understand who your customer is, because even the smartest companies do not understand their customer the way they think they do. And ultimately, customers do change their behavior. So these are some things to think about when you're planning a virtual wine tasting as a producer. And if you're not a producer, you can still listen to this because I think it may be interesting, and you can participate anyway in terms of how you respond to these virtual wine tastings. One is create a written plan. It doesn't have to be large. It's, what are your objectives? Create a written plan. It doesn't have to be large. It has to be something that, is going to reference back to your thoughts. Because you did something, but you didn't do a plan on it. I worked for a very large business today, which was, when I started working there years ago, it was about $20 million. Now it's $1 billion business. And I wrote the business plan for it. But before then, they had been operating 6 months without a business plan, which is very unusual. Even in, very business plan savvy San Francisco, it didn't happen. Ultimately, how do you know where you're going or where you want to go? Or what does it look like? Or what are the gates of success? Or what are the ways you measure how your business is doing? Don't you want that for your virtual wine tasting and your marketing plans? Of course. And a written plan should include some of the following, and you could add more as well. It's suitable to what you need it to do. So create a written plan that is designed for you, that'll make it useful for you, but don't overdo it either. Don't make it so voluminous that it becomes a pain to do. And so you can write some of the following, which is, what are your objectives? What does success look like to you? What is your audience? Who is your audience? And who do you want to attract? What is your format for the virtual tasting? Is it on Twitter? Is it on Zoom? Is it on Facebook? Decide what it's going to look like. Secondly, what does success look like to you? Is there a way that you can, track that success or meet that success marker? And ultimately, what is your audience and who do you want your audience to be? So when you are doing this in a video format, you want to do this with a co-host. And you also want a third person who's going to help you create, the environment, say, for asking questions from people who are in your audience, who may be typing things in or directing towards that particular person, so they can ask that question and get that answer to the question they asked. So that's very important to look at as well. So when you're on Twitter, it's really important to get those answers to the questions you've asked. And sometimes you don't have to answer them exactly right away, but be sure to answer all the questions that you get in your Twitter feed. And the person who asked that question will greatly appreciate that. So plan your show. Is it about the latest wines that you've just released? Is it about new wines you're introducing? Do you have a new winemaker? Bring she or he on to talk about their vision. And so have that planned out, but also plan for potential questions and also have those questions readily answered and available. So what I would also recommend is technical sheets. Make sure you put them in the box of samples you're sending out. Very important to do, as well as an email, because that reinforces several ways a person's getting those technical sheets, as well as being able to remind that person to take a look at them. And you might even have fewer questions, technical questions you might expect. Not that you're opposed to that necessarily, but that's one way of really getting to the heart of the matter, of making it a fruitful and beneficial conversation. So you're going to get a rich collection of analytics, and you could look at that in terms of what is successful, what isn't. And those things that are really important are to attach photos to your questions, and also to respond with photos. People really like a photo, and they like an answer as well. And somehow the photo really makes the question more alive, and I think that's a really important thing to look at. And so when we look at this all together, it's important to look at having an organized virtual wine tasting. Not that people don't do that. A lot of people do that. A lot of people are prepared. And it's just nice to come to a virtual wine tasting where you're using your valuable time and theirs as well, but you're also doing so in a meaningful manner. Now, I've started my podcast. I'll post those particular places I can be found, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, as well as iHeartRadio. Take a look there, take a listen. And so I think this is a really great way of talking about things in general, and to step away just for a moment, just for one video, and to talk about things that are really important, in addition to wine, which is, of course, wine reviews are very important. So thank you for watching. Let's stay connected. More reviews, more topical matters on this as well. So thank you for watching. Stay connected, be safe, and thank you for your support. So let's stay connected. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and WordPress. Stay tuned for more. Sante.